I want to be associated with the remarks the Minister made about the Department officials. They have worked very hard in difficult circumstances and they have performed their duties very efficiently indeed. There's a number of questions I want to ask the Minister, and if she doesn't get time to answer them all today, perhaps she might write to me. First of all, what is the Government's intention in relation to the €350 per week COVID payment? Is that due to be extended beyond the 15th of June? And if so, for how long? And if and when the Government decide to terminate that payment, are they going to do it in a tapered manner, or are they going to let people fall off the cliff immediately back to their pre-existing rates of social protection? And thirdly, are there any proposals to change the eligibility criteria for either the illness-related or the unemployment pandemic payments? Another question arises is the question of arrears. Quite a number of my constituents and people who have contacted me from outside have mentioned that they haven't been paid from the beginning for one reason or another, a lot of them because they made paper applications and were told to go back and do it online. When are those arrears going to be paid? And can I also draw the Minister's attention to the fact that the Department has signalled that if there are quite a number of people, as you know, Minister, who are receiving means-tested payments who work part-time, and they're entitled to receive the full COVID €350 per week plus their pre-existing level of social protection. Now, the Department has signalled that in cases where their income from employment is less than the €350 per week, there will be a clawback. Now, that sum, according to my calculations, can run into €1,000 or more in many cases, and this will be presented to people who have suffered a very dramatic reduction in income. Imagine somebody who goes from €350 to their pre-existing social welfare level and have lost their job at the same time. So I want does the Government intend to proceed with this, and if so, in what manner? I also want to point out to the Minister, as she will be aware, that, and she's already conceded this, I think, or the Department have conceded it, that the increased level of unemployment will require renewed concentration on our labour activation services. And I want to ask the Minister, are there any plans to extend the range of apprenticeships? Are there any plans to introduce some flexibility into the community employment scheme? Because despite some changes to that recently, it still remains notoriously inflexible, particularly for an era of what we project to be high unemployment. And thirdly, can the Minister give me an assurance that the local employment services will be to the front and centre of this labour activation effort that is going to take place? What is the position now regarding Torresnua and CTAC? Their contract was supposed to end next December. Are they gone next December, or is there a possibility that they could reappear again in competition with the local state-funded labour activation services? I'd like an answer to those. There's a number of other matters, but time doesn't allow me to go into them in detail. For example, my understanding is that it's the policy of all sides of the House to encourage people to work, whether self-employed or as employees, over the age of 66. Now, when I look at how the over 66s, who through no fault of their own, the business they worked with has closed down due to the COVID pandemic, or their own business has closed down, yet they are not entitled to the COVID payment, or they are not entitled even to a top-up on their pension to reach the COVID payment. I think that sends out a very bad signal to people who are trying to encourage to work beyond the age of 66. On pensions generally, the Minister was pursuing a number of initiatives before the election, for example, auto-enrolment, which is very badly needed. Has the timetable slipped on that now? How much has the timetable slipped on that, or where are we on it? And secondly, the total contributions approach, where are we with that? It was expected that that would be introduced certainly by the middle of this year. I also want to ask the Minister, has the Government given any thought, or has any thought been given within the Department of Social Protection to the idea of protecting people against, protecting the poorest in this society against increases in carbon tax? Because the increase in the fuel allowance is a very inadequate way to do that. I also want to ask the Minister if any thought has been given to the question of indexing social welfare, not to the headline rate of inflation, but to something like average wages, because you will be aware that if the gap between the people on social welfare, the poorest in the country, if the gap between them and other parts of the economy is allowed to widen, then you widen poverty and inequality. And finally, can I ask the Minister, is she aware of the implications for her department of the recent actions by Debenhams, who are employing quite a number of 1,000 people in this country? The Irish Debenhams company made their staff redundant in the middle of the COVID situation, and the English company then removed all the assets from the Irish company, leaving the Department of Social Protection, or rather the Irish taxpayer, with a huge bill for statutory redundancy. Now, are we as a state going to stand aside in the face of this blatant daylight robbery? To put not too fine a point on it. Does the government have any position on that? And as I'm on the question of redundancy, the Minister will be aware that under the legislation we passed 7 or 8 weeks ago, people who become redundant during the period of the COVID are now precluded from applying for redundancy within the normal 4-week period. They are delayed until some unspecified time in the future, as yet to be decided. Wouldn't it be only right and fair that, in view of those circumstances, that companies shouldn't be allowed to make people redundant then during the COVID pandemic? If they wish to do so afterwards, or if they have to do so afterwards, so be it. So there are some of the points I want to raise. As I say, I don't have time, because I want to accommodate my colleagues. I don't have time to go into this in detail, but just to remind the House that this week, 584,000 people received the unemployment COVID payment. 44,600 people received the illness-related COVID payment. In addition to that, ordinary social welfare payment, job seekers benefit, job seekers allowance, came to 215,000. That's 850,000 people. So there's a lot of the population, these are families, a lot of the population affected by the measures taken by the government, and it's time we had detailed scrutiny on the matter, which is why I'm delighted we're discussing it in some detail next week. But I hope the Minister can answer some of those questions in the interim.